Hello everyone, welcome back. Durin's release is very much imminent, and I want to talk about the teams that I'm looking forward to trying out when I get him, because I'm definitely going to get him. We got to see him in the Nod Cry story doing some pretty interesting things, and after having a look at his kit, I actually think it's pretty cool, and I actually think it might be quite interesting to use, so that's why I'm very excited for him. Durin's kit has two versions for you to choose from, and it's all to do with his skill. If you use his skill into his skill again, this results in the Purity form, aka Support form. If you use skill into normal attack, this results in the Darkness form, aka the DPS form. And the form you choose for Durin will basically determine his role in the team. Easiest way to remember this is by looking at his A1 passive. The Support form shreds resistance by 20% for Pyro and the other element if you do any of the Pyro reactions, with the notable exception of Melt and Vape. DPS form increases Durin's own Vape and Melt damage by 40%. On top of that, we have Durin's ult to consider, because depending on the form he's in, his ult will change to reflect the role in the team. Support form is a circular AoE pyro hit that follows you around, whereas DPS form is single target damage that is of course higher talent scaling. Both forms will actually work off field. TLDR on the rest of his kit, his normal attacks are whatever, who cares, although there was a time, I think, where charge attack on field Durin was actually something to consider. Nowadays, it's not really that great anymore, but it's still something you could try. His A4 passive, on the other hand, is a talent buff based on how much attack Durin has, with plus 3% for every 100 attack he has. This caps out at 75%, aka at 2,500 attack. And on top of that, he is of course part of the Hexenzirkel. Let's talk about the Hexenzirkel buffs real quick. Essentially, the idea is that a select group of characters from Mondstadt who have varying relations to the Hexenzirkel witches in the story are all getting varying levels of buffs in the upcoming patch, and they will also get additional buffs if at least two of them are in a team together. So on top of things like Night Soul and Moonsign, we now have something that's apparently being called Hexerei, at least in the beta. Currently, the Hexenzirkel characters include Fischl for some reason, Razor for some reason, Astromancer Barbalot Trismegistus' student Mona, Alice's daughter Claire, Venti, Rhindotter's creation Albedo, his student Sucrose, and of course Rhindotter's creation that Albedo turned into a human of some description, Durin. Ostensibly, assuming they are playable, Alice and Nicole will be part of this group. There's a rumor going around that Varka is somehow going to be part of this group, but I'd like to think that it's not real, because I am actually hoping that we're going to be seeing a wave of Knights of Favge buffs, including Lisa, Jean, and Noelle. The precedent that is being set by the Hexenzirkel buffs should hopefully be extending beyond Mondstadt into Liyue, and more importantly in Azuma, because there's a certain faction of the hottest women in the game that I of course would love to get buffs of this kind. I do want to talk about that in another video, so if you're interested in that kind of content, then don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Did you know that about 90% of y'all haven't done that yet? So get to it. Let's make it happen. Also, if you want to ring that bell, you can be notified of the latest content on the channel, including live streams. I think we're due for a Warframe quest very, very soon. The old piece should be coming around about December, I believe. And maybe I'll do another Duet Night Abyss video as well. We'll just have to see. So Durin's Hexenzirkel passive is rather straightforward. In a Hexerei team, his A1 passive will be 75% stronger, so that's plus 35% res shred instead in his support form, and plus 70% vape and melt damage in his DPS form. So when it comes to the teams that I want to try with Durin, I want to talk about the following. We're going to be looking at teams where he's just there being an easy access pyro off-fielder. We have teams where his res shred can be fully utilized, and then of course we have teams where he's potentially doing quite a lot of damage. Let's start off with a team where he's just easy access pyro off-fielding. Meltloy. In this team, Durin's res shred won't be active. What I'm going to be very curious about is whether this team is another team where Durin is supporting Aloy with his Pyro app, in which case, I suppose you might as well just stick with DPS form, or potentially a team where Aloy's on-field cryo can be used to enable Durin's off-field Pyro to be melting. Now, both support and DPS mode Durin have standard ICD on his Pyro app, so he's not going to end up being like Shangling, who can melt with no ICD. I can see a rotation ending with Aloy's grenades into Sucrose's skill and ult, and then swapping back to Aloy to on-field, possibly using even a cryo-infused Sucrose ult butterfly for more cryo wap and by extension more Aloy damage. Durin can then take advantage of the EM buff from Sucrose as well. Having both Sucrose and Durin on the team means it'd be a Hexerei team, her skill apparently giving everyone a hyper-specific damage percent buff, but let's just say it's 6%. Her ult giving Durin another hyper-specific damage percent buff, but let's just call it 7%. And her C6 giving Durin yet another hyper-specific damage percent buff, but let's just call it 9. Which all comes out to being around about 21.4% damage buffs. Now, what makes Durin such an easy access off-field Pyro app or DPS compared to other characters is that he's probably arguably the least restrictive. Xiangling needs 3000 ER in order to be able to burst every rotation, otherwise relying on Warbar. Dehise is tied to a circle, Xinyan's needs her level 3 shield to be intact, Mawika does need at least one other character from Natlan in the team to burst every rotation. That being said though, this is only for getting the damage percent buff from her burst. If you're only looking for the Pyro app, then yes, Mawika is in fact very unrestrictive, otherwise you could just get her C1 and move on from there. PMC, on the other hand, can actually work perfectly fine. The duration of their Pyro app will of course depend on whether or not they use their burst. Now, Durin's off-field Pyro app is burst reliant, so you might think that it requires a lot of energy, but what's hilarious is that Durin is, I think, the first character ever to have a direct energy generation stat on his skill. Using his skill to enter either form will automatically generate 33 energy at crowned skill levels. This can be done once every 6 seconds, and ostensibly, potentially twice if you use Sack Sword. I'm not entirely sure if that's going to work. Otherwise, the skill itself actually has a 12-second cooldown. Durin has a 70 cost burst, so if you're regenerating 33 energy, apparently this means that his ER requirements are pretty much non-existent. We'll just have to see if that remains to be the case. So this team could be pretty insane. You can probably make it work with Wriothesley instead of Aloy if you don't have her, of course. I do wonder if double swirling ends up being an option, both with Wriothesley and with Aloy. We'll just have to see. Switching gears, I want to talk about burning teams. Now, I speak from this perspective of not having Kinich, but I suppose this would also apply to the Kinich players among us. Generally speaking, when you set up a team for the likes of Kinich or Emilie, it can be a little finicky to get any res shred available for all of the DPS characters on the team. For the Pyro characters, you'd probably need to bring VV or at least Shillinen. For the Dendra characters, you would need to bring Deepwood. Now, in a Kinich Emilie team, you could just as well put Emilie on Deepwood and she'll function absolutely perfectly fine. But what if, for whatever reason, you don't have a particularly good Deepwood build for Emilie? Because let's say all your Deepwood pieces were previously farmed for the likes of Nahida, Alhaitham, Tegnari, characters who are famously not really attack scalers. Now, you could always bring Zhongli. In fact, he's pretty phenomenal in the team like this. He has a shield, he shreds every res in the game, including Pyro and Dendra simultaneously, but typically he doesn't do that much damage. I mean, he has his ult, so the meteor damage is nice, but it's not really a whole lot of damage. Enter Durin, who effectively drops the defensive utility in favor of quite a lot more damage, I think. This could end up being a weirder team if you also include someone like Medic Mona, and thus you make the team a Hexerei team. But in that case, you're including the team-wide healing. If you have a C2, you get some 80 EM, which is probably not useful, but it does make the burning do a little bit more damage. And then on top of that, you get 15 crit rate for everyone if you have her C4, and on top of that, Durin and Mona together, if you have her C4, does end up doing some more damage because they get 15% more crit damage. This could turn out to be a real interesting team that I'd play with Arlecchino, because like I mentioned in the Arlecchino rerun video, I seem to be finding myself playing her primarily as an on-field Pyro DPS in specifically these teams these days. Now, this is not the only team where I'm feeling pretty keen to play more Emilie, especially with a Pyro off-fielder on the team who also immediately brings more Dendro res as well. We could bring Emilie to the previously mentioned Meltloy team, although without a healer, things might get a little bit weird. But in a similar fashion, we probably can bring Durin and Emilie into a BurnVape team like something with Molani. Now, unless you're bringing Shillen in, there won't be any real way to get Hydro Res shredded since Durin won't be bringing that, and it's highly unlikely that he can do the vapes himself, so support form will continue to be the way to go. What's also useful about support form is that Durin's AoE Pyro can ensure that the 3 or so enemies, if there are 3 enemies around, that you're trying to tag with Molani, they will all have Pyro ore on them, and if you're not bringing Shillen in, you may want to consider a Hexerei team with Mona instead. At least then the Dendro Red Shred is stronger, and Mona can buff both Molani and Emilie's damage even further, so that's actually pretty damn nice. Zajef has actually been getting pretty excited about a different kind of Molani team with Mona, probably with Durin as well, but maybe not. Alternatively, there's Burnload, and I'd probably stick with Clorinde in this team. Now, the funny thing is that in this team, it's basically like an overload team with Chevy, but because we have Emilie in it, we lose Chevy's 40% Pyro Electro Res Shred. But with support Durin in this team, we actually can get 20% Pyro, 20% Electro, and 20% Dendro Res Shred. So it's entirely possible that this team actually ends up being more damage overall than a standard Chevy overload team. I don't know if this has been calced and whether this has been discussed in great detail, but I for one am actually feeling pretty good about it. All that being said, Chevy overload teams are still going to be absolutely perfectly fine. There's plenty of permutations available, but I think I'll of course compare Clorinde Burnload with Clorinde Overload with Durin. That being said though, I'm potentially partial to a full quick swap overload team with, let's say, Lisa and the illustrious Yai Miko. Of course, the big thing is that if you're getting so much res shred from this team from Chevy and Durin, you're probably going to be finding yourself in negative res territory, so any extra res shred does end up being 50% strong. Now, I can hear all the meta slaves in the chat frothing at the mouth. Yes, of course, I will have a look at the overload teams with Fischl. Relax. But Fischl, for some inexplicable reason, is part of the Hexenzirkel, and in a Hexerei team with Fischl, overloads are going to give the team a plus 22.5% attack buff from Fischl, and if somehow Electro or Lunar Charge happens, because let's say you go up against Tulpa, then everyone also gets 90 EM. So that's actually pretty good. And with C6 Fischl, both of these buffs get doubled in a Hexerei team. Will this make me play Fischl over Miko? Of course not. Do you even know who I am? But obviously Fischl is going to be a lot stronger than before. Oh, there's also Razor Overload for those who are wondering. I don't care about Razor at all. So no, I will not be trying it out, but apparently he's going to be very strong so long as you have C6 Fischl, C6 Chevreuse, C6 Bennett apparently. So if you have that, go have fun. If you don't, then apparently you're kinda cooked. And finally, I want to try vape teams with Mona. Now with the Hexenzirkel update, on-field Mona is going to be a thing, and I for one am very interested in trying both forward vape Mona with Durin and DPS Durin with Mona driving him. Because Mona's buffs are in my opinion the most exciting out of all of them and the most interesting. For those who don't remember, in a Hexerei team, Mona's normal attacks and charge attacks can cause Vaporise reactions to do more damage. There's 3 stacks that you can grab, capping at 15% additional EM multiplier, I believe. It is pretty nice in the grand scheme of things. Her normal attacks can also extend her omen duration by up to 8 seconds. This takes 4 hits with a half-second cooldown, so it takes about 2 seconds to get your duration extended by those 8 seconds. This does mean that it is effectively a 6-second duration extension if you're swapping off Mona to use your character as an on-fielder, if that's something you're hoping to do. C1 now has an additional stipulation where off-fielders, like Durin, get their reaction EM multiplier, I think, increased by 39% instead of 15%. This is actually a weird number in my opinion, but whatever, it is what it is. C2 makes it easier for Mona to do charge attacks, and doing a charge attack gives everyone plus 80 EM. C4, like I mentioned, gives Hexenzirkel folks plus 15% crit damage on top of the already plus 15% crit rate that everyone is getting when they hit enemies affected by the Omen. And C6 makes it so that her charge attacks get a 60% damage buff every second. It's the same 60% damage buff that you'd normally be getting if you're actually dashing all over the place with the C6. This caps out at 180% damage percent, and the charge attacks on enemies affected by the Omen actually end up doing straight up double damage. Not plus 100% damage percent, it's actually double damage. So with all that in mind, I think it's pretty clear to say that DPS Mona with Durin is most likely going to pop off super duper hard. So I am of course very excited to give that a try and see what we can do with a team like that. No doubt there will of course be a bunch of other teams to try. Maybe Burgeon will actually be great again, especially with Lauma as well. Maybe we'll see something completely different emerge that nobody ever thought about. We'll just have to see. Just a quick note about building Durin. I have started getting Wolf Fang from the Battle Pass. It's probably the best 4-star weapon available for him, but of course if you're not a Battle Pass player, you could use Umbrella if you have it. Otherwise, I don't think there's any particularly useful options in the 4-star category. Otherwise, most of the 5-star weapons are probably very whatever on him, with the obvious exception of his signature weapon, which is kind of stupid strong on him, especially in Hexerei teams. That does seem to be, by the way, the ongoing pattern now with signature weapons. If you have a look at, let's say, Nefer's weapon, it is kind of ludicrous on her, and turns out Lauma as well. Also for artifact sets, there's a rumor floating around that in Luna 4, we're going to be getting an artifact set for the Hexenzirkel characters alongside another artifact set that's going to be great for Column Beta in particular. So I suppose there's no need to go too crazy on the pre-farming. I'll defer to the inevitable Durin pre-release analysis from Zajef, but my guess is just sticking with 2-piece Crimson Noblesse is probably the way to go. You don't need any ER from using Durin's ult because of Durin's skill, so I think EOSF is kind of at the window as well. Otherwise, I suppose 4-piece Noblesse should make absolute perfect sense. No surprises here, I am excited for Durin's release, and I can't wait to try him out. When Luna 3 drops, the first stream I think I will do will be focused exclusively on Durin gameplay, and then later on I might start the Archon quest as well as the Durin story quest that is of course upcoming. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. What kind of Durin team are you looking forward to? Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, hope you guys enjoyed. If you liked this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Genshin Impact action, and until next time, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Emerge.